If you grew up in the late 80s and 90s, chances are you remember the Bundy family. A worn-out shoe salesman who hated his job, a wife who refused to cook, a daughter obsessed with looks, and a son who could never quite win. Married with Children wasn't just a sitcom. It was chaos, sarcasm, and brutal honesty wrapped in laughter. It showed a version of family life that felt shockingly real, even uncomfortable at times. But behind those jokes and outrageous moments, the real lives of the cast were often even more dramatic than anything written in the script. Fame, struggle, loss, and unexpected comebacks. The story of the Bundy family didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. Before we go deeper, we have to ask, which character from the Bundy family stayed with you the most? Was it Al and his endless complaints? Peggy and her iconic attitude? Kelly's unforgettable charm? Or Bud's constant attempts to prove himself? Let us know in the comments, because your answer might say more about you than you think. Married with Children first aired in 1987 and ran for an incredible decade until 1997, becoming one of the most controversial and groundbreaking sitcoms in television history. At a time when most TV families were portrayed as loving, perfect, and morally upright, the Bundys were the complete opposite. They argued, they failed, they complained, and that was exactly why audiences connected with them. The show didn't try to inspire perfection. It exposed reality in the most exaggerated, hilarious way possible. Its bold, unapologetic humor pushed boundaries that few shows dared to cross. It challenged traditional values, sparked public debates, and even faced attempts to be censored. And yet, that controversy only made it more popular. Married with Children became a cultural phenomenon, influencing countless sitcoms that came after it. Decades later, the show still holds a unique place in pop culture. Not because it was polished or ideal, but because it dared to be flawed, loud, and brutally honest. And maybe that's why the Bundy family still feels so unforgettable today. David Faustino was just a teenager when he stepped into the role of Bud Bundy, the sharp-tongued, overconfident son who never quite succeeded the way he imagined. On screen, Bud was always scheming, always trying to prove he was smarter than everyone else, yet somehow always ending up one step behind. And in many ways, David's real life would mirror that same pattern. Fame came early. Too early, some might say. While most kids his age were still figuring out who they were, David was already a recognizable face across America. For 10 years, he grew up in front of millions of viewers, becoming inseparable from the character of Bud Bundy. But when the show ended in 1997, that identity became both a blessing and a limitation. Like many child stars, he struggled to break free from the role that made him famous. Casting directors didn't see David Faustino. They saw Bud Bundy. And that made it incredibly difficult to land new, serious roles. The opportunities that once came easily began to disappear, replaced by smaller appearances, voice acting, and occasional guest roles that never quite matched the success of his early years. Behind the scenes, there were also personal challenges. The transition from constant fame to a quieter life isn't easy for anyone, especially for someone who had never known anything else. David explored different paths, including music and independent projects, trying to reinvent himself in an industry that had already defined him. Over the years, he made several attempts at a comeback. Some projects gained attention, but none were able to recreate the cultural impact of Married with Children. Still, he remained connected to fans, embracing his legacy rather than running from it. His story isn't one of scandal or tragedy, but of a quieter, more relatable struggle. The challenge of growing up in the spotlight, and then learning how to live when that spotlight fades. Next, we turn to someone who wasn't part of the Bundy family. but somehow became just as unforgettable. Amanda Bierce brought Marcy to life with a sharp edge that audiences loved to hate. But her real story would become far more groundbreaking than anything we saw on screen. Amanda Bierce played Marcy Rhodes, later Marcy D'Arcy, the uptight, outspoken neighbor who constantly clashed with Al Bundy. She was intelligent, organized, and often the complete opposite of the chaotic Bundy household. Her presence added balance to the madness and made her one of the most memorable characters in the entire series. But Amanda's real-life journey would take a path that was far more significant than her on-screen role. At a time when Hollywood was far less accepting, she made the brave decision to publicly come out as gay. This wasn't just a personal moment, it was a cultural one. In the early 90s, very few actors were willing to take that risk, knowing it could cost them their careers. The pressure was intense. Media attention, public scrutiny, and industry bias all became part of her reality. Opportunities began to shift, and like many actors who challenged the norms of their time, Amanda faced an uncertain future in front of the camera. But instead of stepping away from the industry, she reinvented herself behind it. Amanda Bierce transitioned into directing, working on a wide range of television shows and quietly building a respected career in a different role. It was a move that allowed her to stay creative while avoiding the limitations she once faced as an actress. Unlike many of her co-stars, she chose a more private life. Away from the spotlight, she focused on her family and her work, rarely seeking attention or headlines. And perhaps that's what makes her story so powerful. Not scandal, not chaos, but courage, authenticity, and quiet resilience. Because sometimes, the boldest thing you can do in Hollywood is simply be yourself. Katey Sagal brought Peggy Bundy to life in a way no one else could. With her towering red hair, bold attitude, and complete refusal to play the role of a traditional housewife, Peggy became an icon almost instantly. She didn't cook, she didn't clean, and she certainly didn't apologize for it. Audiences laughed at her, but they also couldn't look away. Peggy Bundy wasn't just a character, she was a statement. But behind that larger-than-life presence was a woman fighting battles far more serious than anything on screen. Long before, and even during her rise to fame, Katey struggled with addiction. It was a dark period that could have easily destroyed her career before it truly began. In an industry known for excess, she found herself caught in a cycle that many never escape. What makes her story remarkable is not the fall, but the recovery. Katey made the decision to get sober, and she committed to it fully. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but it changed everything. She didn't just survive Hollywood, she rebuilt herself within it. Then came one of the most heartbreaking moments of her life. During the later years of Married, with Children, Katey experienced the loss of her child. It was a tragedy so personal and devastating that few people fully understood the strength it took for her to keep going. And yet, she did. She returned to work, to life, carrying that pain quietly while continuing to make millions of people laugh. For a time, it seemed like Peggy Bundy might define her forever. But Katey refused to be limited by one role. Years later, she shocked audiences all over again with her performance as Gemma Teller in Sons of Anarchy. This time, the humor was gone, replaced by intensity, power, and darkness. It was a complete reinvention, and it proved what many had underestimated for years. Her range was extraordinary. Katey Sagal's life is not just a story of fame. It's a story of survival, loss, and resilience. She faced addiction, heartbreak, and the pressure of an industry that often forgets its stars, and still managed to rise again, stronger than ever. And if her story shows anything, it's that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who have already been broken and chose to rebuild anyway. Then there was Christina Applegate, the girl everyone thought they understood. As Kelly Bundy, she became the ultimate blonde bombshell of the 90s. Carefree, charming, and hilariously clueless, Kelly was the kind of character that could have easily been one-dimensional. But Christina brought something more to the role. A natural charisma that made her impossible to ignore. She wasn't just the dumb blonde, she was the heart of many of the show's most memorable moments. Fame came fast, and with it came expectations. For years, Christina was seen through a very specific lens. Casting directors, audiences, even the industry itself. They all saw Kelly Bundy. Breaking out of that image was one of the biggest challenges of her career. But unlike many actors who get stuck, Christina pushed forward. She transitioned into film and more mature television roles, proving that she was far more than the character that made her famous. Projects like Anchorman showcased her comedic timing in a completely different way, and gradually, she rebuilt her identity as a versatile actress. Then life took an unexpected turn. In her 30s, Christina was diagnosed with breast cancer. It was a moment that changed everything. She made the difficult decision to undergo a double mastectomy, a choice that was both physically and emotionally overwhelming. But instead of hiding from it, she spoke openly, raising awareness and helping countless others facing the same fear. And just when it seemed like she had already fought one of life's biggest battles, another came. Years later, she revealed her diagnosis with multiple sclerosis, a condition that affects the body in unpredictable ways, challenging even the simplest daily tasks. For someone who had spent her life in front of the camera, it was yet another unimaginable obstacle. But what defines Christina Applegate is not the illness, it's the strength. Through every challenge, she has remained honest, resilient, and deeply human. She continues to work, to speak out, and to inspire. Not as a symbol of perfection, but as someone who refuses to give up, no matter how difficult the path becomes. Because behind the laughter, behind the fame, behind the character of Kelly Bundy, is a woman whose real story is far more powerful than anything television could ever write. And then, there's Ed O'Neill. To millions of fans, he will always be Al Bundy. The exhausted shoe salesman with a permanent scowl. A man stuck in a life he never imagined, constantly complaining about everything and everyone. Yet somehow becoming one of the most iconic fathers in television history. Al wasn't successful. He wasn't admired. He wasn't even particularly likable at times. But that was exactly the point. He was real. Painfully real. But what many people don't realize is just how close Ed O'Neill came to never becoming Al Bundy at all. Before Hollywood, his life looked very different. He wasn't chasing acting roles. He was chasing a career in football. Ed was a talented athlete, even signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers during the early 1970s. It seemed like his future was set. But just as quickly as that dream appeared, it disappeared. He was cut from the team, and in that moment, everything changed. For a while, he was lost. No clear direction, no guaranteed future. Acting wasn't even a serious plan at first. It was something he discovered later, almost by accident. And like many late starters, the road was anything but easy. He struggled for years, taking small roles, facing rejection after rejection, constantly questioning whether he had made the wrong choice. Then came Married with Children. At first, it wasn't an obvious success. The show was controversial, even criticized. But slowly, it grew. And as it did, Ed O'Neill became inseparable from Al Bundy. The role made him famous, but it also created a trap. Because when the show ended after a decade, Hollywood didn't see Ed O'Neill, the actor. They saw Al Bundy. And that's where the real struggle began. For years, he faced the same problem that so many sitcom stars experience: typecasting. Directors couldn't imagine him as anything else. The offers that came in were limited, repetitive, and often disappointing. After reaching the peak of television fame, he found himself once again in a familiar place: uncertainty. There were moments when it felt like his career might quietly fade away. But Ed O'Neill didn't give up. Instead, he waited. He worked. He stayed patient. And then, years later, everything changed again. Modern Family. When he stepped into the role of Jay Pritchett, audiences saw something completely different. The humor was still there, but now it was layered with depth, warmth, and vulnerability. It wasn't just a comeback, it was a reinvention. And suddenly, the industry saw him in a new light. The role brought him back to the top of television, introducing him to an entirely new generation while reminding older fans just how talented he had always been. It proved something powerful: that one role does not define a lifetime. Ed O'Neill's journey is not a straight line. It's a story of setbacks, second chances, and resilience. From a failed football dream to years of struggle to becoming one of the most recognizable faces in television history. Twice. And maybe that's what makes his story the most powerful of all. Because Al Bundy may have felt stuck in life, but Ed O'Neill never was. He just needed time to become a legend. At this point, we have to ask, when you think about the Bundy family, who stands out the most to you? Is it Al, with his endless frustration and unforgettable one-liners? Peggy, with her bold attitude and iconic style? Kelly, with her charm? Or Bud, constantly trying to prove himself? Tell us in the comments. Because every fan sees this family a little differently. Decades have passed since Married with Children first aired, and time has changed everything. The laughter is still there, the jokes still land, but the people behind those characters have lived entire lives beyond the screen. Some found their way back to success, reinventing themselves and proving their talent all over again. Others faced quiet struggles, battles that the audience never saw, long after the applause faded. And maybe that's what makes this show so special. It was never about perfection. It was never about the ideal family. The Bundys were messy, flawed, sometimes even uncomfortable to watch. But they were real in a way that few television families ever dared to be. They reflected the frustrations, the humor, and the chaos of everyday life. And for millions of viewers growing up during that era, they weren't just characters. They felt familiar. Over time, the world changed. Television changed. But Married with Children remains a snapshot of a different era. Bold, unapologetic, and unforgettable. It reminds us not just of the show itself, but of where we were in our own lives when we watched it. The living rooms, the laughter, the simple moments that somehow stayed with us. Because in the end, the Bundy family wasn't perfect. But maybe that's exactly why we love them. If Married with Children meant something to you, take a moment to share your favorite memory in the comments. And if you enjoy revisiting these stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, because there are many more then and now journeys waiting to be told.